All right, we're on week two of Rules for Radicals with John Weeks. So I go back today after I get home from church and I sit down to eat, and I'm like, well, let me refresh on this. So I turn on the audiobook while I'm eating, and I listen to the first this chapter audio, and they read all the little footnotes. There's one in here I find interesting, but I don't know if I'm going to read all the footnotes. I don't know if they're all that super important. And it took them right at 49 minutes and 50 seconds to get through it. So luckily on this chapter in itself, I don't have a whole lot to add to it. Um, it's a pretty straightforward chapter. So anything that you hear that makes you want to stop and say something, if you have something to inject, go ahead and just stop me. Just say,
Will
"Hey,
do.
stop right there, brother. Freeze
Halt.
in the name of logic." So, so yeah, but we'll get rolling with this because I do have a video to play when we get to a certain part of this chapter. Because every time I read this part of this chapter, it reminds me of a Bill Hicks bit. So we're gonna play a Bill Hicks bit.
Nice.
Yes. All right. So this is chapter one of Rules for Radicals. It's titled "The Purpose." And he quotes Job 7:1, "The life of man upon earth is warfare." And as Donnie Gebert always said, politics is war by any other means. So, what follows is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. The Prince was written by Machiavelli for the haves on how to hold power. Rules for Radicals is written for the have nots on how to take it away. In this
Freeze.
book, yes.
So I had a thought about that line about the prince was written by Machiavelli for the haves on how to hold power. And he's written his book for the have nots on how to take it away.
Mm,
And it made me think about ideas that I came across when I first started reading about libertarianism. And one thing that was really impressed upon me was the idea that, okay, for the Marxists, the bourgeoisie has the power, but and they're oppressing the proletariat. Well, the proletariat needs to take the power. And
mm,
libertarians were kind of like, look, the people who have the power are the people who have the power. It's not this specific class having the power, it's the people who are in power, it's the political class. And so, not that anyone ever said it doesn't matter who has the power, but that kind of idea that like it's the political class versus everyone else. But then in recent years, I've thought more about that and like, you know, to more of a conservative idea that, well, it really does matter who has the power.
mm.
Like, yeah, the people in power have power over you. But let's say uh, they think that whatever group that you belong to from their perspective is evil and they want to kill you. That's one scenario. Or they consider themselves to be part of your group at a certain like at a certain identity level and they just want to like tax you and like bomb foreign countries or something. But so that does matter. So when he said that, I was really interested to see how he's going to navigate that.
Yeah. So I have a couple of things like that you made me think of. I often say in my podcast, I'm sure you've heard me say it, is there are two classes of civilization. There's the parasite class and there's the productive class. And the parasite class is constructed of those that utilize government power and benefits, welfare, entitlement programs, and leech off of the productive class. And what we're seeing, and the reason that to me politics has gotten so uncomfortable, and I've moved further to the right, so to speak, is because I noticed that parasite class is getting bigger and the productive class is getting smaller. So there's less of us expected to finance the desires and needs of the parasite class. And this goes for like corporate welfare or individual like welfare whores, like whatever. I look at it all the same, right? And I remember there was a meme that went around there for a while, and it was a picture of a police officer, and it just said welfare whore on it. And I was like, and I thought it was funny, I was like, yeah, that's pretty funny. That's witty. But the more I think of it, like all the cops I've ever met, I know, like I'm related to some. I go to church. A lot of the guys I go to church with are police officers, and they're all solid middle class guys. Like when I sit and I have a conversation, like one of the guys I was talking to today, we were talking about all the wars that are breaking out all over the place. And he had a very similar take as me. It was like, it's so sad the amount of innocent people that have to pay the price for the rich to hold on to their wealth, you know? And that was just kind of like his natural instinct. And so the more, and like Buck Johnson is one of my closest friends, and he's a firefighter, and so I don't look at those people the same way as like I did when I first got into libertarianism. And I've had more time to think about who they are, what they're doing, how they think about life, how they view family and faith and the nation within itself. And it's not that much different than the way your average truck driver, your average manager, your average productive class citizen would view it. And that's really, I think, where they belong in the hierarchy of things. But now I kind of lost my train of thought. My phone was ringing. Um, so yeah, but yeah, I do see your point with the class structure. That's one thing that's another thing that's really changed about me since moving into Orthodoxy and becoming more involved with the church is I have a different view on hierarchy than I did when I was, you know, agnostic or whatever you want to call me at that point in time. Is I'm a lot more. It's a lot easier to convince me of an honest and natural hierarchy than it was when I first got into libertarianism, and that's changed a lot of my thinking. Is the way I view hierarchy has changed.
Yeah, I like that what you're saying about how you kind of shifted your idea of like anyone who government money is flowing to is just sort of the same class
Yeah.
to really starting to make distinctions. And I remember like Lou Rockwell had an article years ago where he was like, you know, thank God for government inefficiency. Like the government that like gets up early and goes for a run and is really focused and is like really hardworking is like that's a scary government.
Mm.
Um, and so then I would think, and I think other people joked around about this, but I would joke around too, like, oh man, we should just like turn these like weapons manufacturers into like lords, give them land, give them money, but don't do anything. And so, but I've kind of shifted my ideas, maybe similar to how you have, where I'm like the people that are like getting government money and aren't doing anything, like quote unquote, I'm starting to see them as more of a threat. And in part because they actually are doing something. They are helping to create the legitimacy for this system.
Hmm.
Whereas like a firefighter, especially, who say is paid through tax money, but actually risks his life, actually responds to a car accident and deals with people's trauma, actually, is doing something to contribute instead of just uh, voting in Democrats to give them handouts and then dragging down the culture.
Yeah.
And I would understand the libertarian critique of, oh, we should have the free market take care of like fires and accidents. But I totally see 100% see your point. And when I talk to those guys, like I'd rather hang out with those guys than the like, you know, kids that dropped out and are like living on the streets.
The
And
Portland Frog Brigade.
exactly, much rather.
Yeah,
I think I'd be safer too.
probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because maybe I should say that because there's a point later on in this chapter where that subject actually pops up. So let's move on, I guess. So
Let's do it.
I don't want to like start jumping the gun on all these subjects. So in this book, we are concerned with how to create mass organizations to seize power and give it to the people, to realize the democratic dream of equality, justice, peace, cooperation, equal and full opportunities for education, full and useful employment, health, and the creation of those circumstances in which man can have the chance to live by values that give meaning to life. We are talking about a mass power organization which will change the world into a place where all men and women walk erect in the spirit of that credo of the Spanish Civil War: better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. This means revolution. The significant changes in history have been made by revolutions. There are people who say that it is not revolution, but evolution that brings about change. But evolution is simply the term used by non participants to denote a particular sequence of revolutions as they synthesize into a specific major social change. Okay, this is my cue for the Bill Hicks bit. So we got 3 minutes, I think, to listen. Oh, there we go. All right. So that's what that reminds me of. Every time I read that part, he's talking about revolution and evolution. We want our thumbs. And it's funny too, because my buddy Gord has been a truck driver for 30 years. He just wrote a book called End of the Road. And it's about the destruction of the trucking industry. And this truck driver on X told him that, well, I'm still out here driving truck while you're sitting at a desk driving a desk. And I was like, I just thought, it looks like we got ourselves a reader. Some stereotypes stick, man. That's why they're there. So, all right. In this book, I propose certain general observations, propositions, and concepts of the mechanics of mass movements in the various stages of the cycle of action and reaction in revolution. This is not an ideological book except insofar as argument for change, rather than for the status quo, can be called an ideology. Different people in different places, in different situations, in different times will construct their own solutions and symbols of salvation for those times. Notice the use of like religious terminology. I found that so interesting.
And he quoted the Bible in the beginning of this chapter.
Well, and here he goes talking about this book will not contain any panacea or dogma. I detest and fear dogma. That's why you're not that's why you're not a Christian. That's why you're a revolutionist. I know that all revolutions must have ideologies to spur them on, that in the heat of conflict, these ideologies tend to be smelted into rigid dogmas claiming exclusive possession of the truth and the keys to paradise is tragic. Dogma is the enemy of human freedom. Dogma must be watched for and apprehended at every turn and twist of the revolutionary movement. The human spirit glows from that small inner light of doubt whether we are right, while those who believe with complete certainty that they possess the right and dark inside and darken the world outside with cruelty, pain, and injustice. That is such a weird sentence. Those who enshrine the poor or have nots are as guilty as other dogmatists and just as dangerous. To diminish the danger that ideology we will deteriorate into dogma and to protect the free, open, questing, and creative mind of man, as well as to allow for change, no ideology should be more specific than that of America's founding fathers for the general welfare.
Trees.
Yep.
So when he's talking about the dogma there, I kind of, it came across to me as if he was saying, like, we must have no dogma, but like, that's the dogma. And it
Mm,
made me think of like when people say, um, we must be tolerant. The only thing we cannot tolerate is intolerance. And then that just made me think of your basic, like, postmodern Marxist idea of like, um, we must reject all grand meta narratives as they give you a grand meta narrative. And almost borderline, like he's saying, look, obviously, there's no truth, and we know that's true. So let's keep that in mind.
mm.
And so I thought that was funny.
Yeah, he gets into a little bit of relativism here in a little bit. I also find it funny that the more secularistic and the more materialistic a person is, the less they like dogma because dogma actually is it offers rules and like almost like barriers, that you don't cross these lines, you stay within these bounds. And what he's trying to get at is, look, we can't be saddled with this burden of having to remain within certain lines of obedience or behavior. We have to be flexible and be able to utilize. It's very utilitarian, I guess. You got to be able to utilize whatever means necessary in order to reach the point of your revolution. And dogmas are restricting. Niels Bohr, the great atomic physicist, admirably stated the civilized position on dogmatism. Every sentence I utter must be understood not as an affirmation, but as a question. I will argue that man's hopes lie in the acceptance of great law of change, that a general understanding of the principles of change will provide clues for rational action and awareness of the realistic relationship between means and ends, and how each determines the other. I hope that these pages will contribute to the education of the radicals of today and to the conversation of hot, emotional, impulsive passions that are impotent and frustrating to actions that will be calculated, purposeful, and effective. I can't help but being in Lent, like, just be my eyes are like magnetized like to the word passions, impulsive passions. It's like the whole purpose of fasting and prayer and is to get your passions under control, right? I'm wearing a death to the world shirt right now, and like on the back is like die to yourself, die to thyself. It's like control yourself. Don't let your passions and all the worldly objects, control your attitude and the way that you function in the world. And he's like, no, it's good. Like, give yourself over to your passions. It's just a complete like 180. An example of the political insensitivity of many of today's so-called radicals and the lost opportunities is found in this account of an episode during the trial of the Chicago Seven. Over the weekend, some 150 lawyers from all parts of the country had gathered in Chicago to picket the federal building in protest against Judge Hoffman's arrest of the four lawyers. This delegation, which was supported by 13 members of the faculty of Harvard Law School, and which included a number of other professors as well, submitted a brief as friend of the court, which called Judge Hoffman's actions a travesty of justice, which threatens to destroy the confidence of the American people in the entire judicial process. By 10 o'clock, the angry lawyers had begun to march around the federal building, where they were joined by hundreds of student radicals, several Black Panthers, and 100 or more blue-helmeted Chicago police. Shortly before noon, about 40 of the picketing lawyers carried their signs into the lobby of the federal building, despite the notice posted on the glass wall beside the entrance and signed by Judge Campbell forbidding such demonstrations within the building. Hardly had the lawyers entered, however, than Judge Campbell himself descended to the lobby dressed in black robes and accompanied by a marshal, a stenographer, and his court clerk. Surrounded by the angry lawyers, who were themselves encircled by a ring of police and federal marshals, the judge proceeded to hold court then and there. He announced that unless the pickets withdrew immediately, he would charge them with contempt. This time, he warned, there could be no question that their contempt would occur in the presence of the court and would thus be subject to summary punishment. No sooner had he made this announcement, however, than a voice from the throng shouted, "Fuck you, Campbell." After a moment of tense silence, followed by a cheer from the crowd and a noticeable stiffening among the police, Judge Campbell himself withdrew. Then the lawyers, too, left the lobby and rejoined the pickets on the sidewalk. Jason Epstein, The Great Conspiracy Trial, Random House, 1970. The picketing lawyers threw away a beautiful opportunity to create a nationwide issue. Offhand, there would seem to have been two choices, either of which would have forced the judge's hand and kept the issue going. One of the lawyers could have stepped up to the judge after the voice said, "Fuck you, Campbell," said that the lawyers there did not support personal obscenities, but they were not leaving. Or all the lawyers together could have chorused with one voice, "Fuck you, Campbell." They did neither. Instead, they let the initiative pass from them to the judge and achieved nothing. Radicals must be resilient, adaptable to shifting political circumstances, and sensitive enough to process of action and reaction to avoid being trapped by their own tactics and forced to travel a road not of their choosing. In short, radicals must have a degree of control over the flow of events. Here I propose to present an arrangement of certain facts and general concepts of change, a step toward a science of revolution. All societies discourage and penalize ideas and writings that threaten the ruling status quo. It is understandable, therefore, that the literature of a have society is a veritable desert whenever we look for writings on social change. Once the American Revolution was done with, we can find very little besides the right of revolution that is laid down in the Declaration of Independence as a fundamental right. 73 years later, Thoreau's brief essay on the duty of civil disobedience, followed by Lincoln's reaffirmation of the revolutionary right in 1861, there are many phrases extolling the sacredness of revolution, that is, revolutions of the past. Our enthusiasm for the sacred right of revolution is increased and enhanced with the passage of time. The older the revolution, the more it recedes into history, the more sacred it becomes. Except for Thoreau's limited remarks, our society has given us few words of advice, few suggestions of how to fertilize social change. From the haves, on the other hand, there has come an unceasing flood of literature justifying the status quo. Religious, economic, social, political, and legal tracts endlessly attack all revolutionary ideas and action for change as immoral, fallacious, and against God, country, and mother. which is funny that he says that because he mentioned the Prince earlier for the haves, and he was writing a book for the have-nots. So the Prince is like a third the length of this book. It's like maybe 100 pages or something like that. You could probably read it in one sitting if you wanted to, maybe like 3 hours or something. These literary sedations by the status quo include the threat that since all such movements are unpatriotic, subversive, spawned in hell, and reptilian in their creeping insidiousness, dire punishments will be meted out to their supporters. All great revolutions, including Christianity, the various reformations, democracy, capitalism, and socialism, have suffered these epithets in the times of their birth. To the status quo concerned about its public image, revolution is the only force which has no image, but instead casts a dark, ominous shadow of things to come. The have nots of the world, swept up in their present upheavals and desperately seeking revolutionary writings, can find such literature only from the communists, both red and yellow. Here they can read about tactics, maneuvers, strategy, and principles of action in the making of revolutions. Since in this literature all ideas are embedded in the language of communism, revolution appears synonymous with communism. When in the throes of their revolutionary fervor, the have nots hungrily turn to us in their first steps from starvation to subsistence. We respond with a bewildering, unbelievable, and meaningless conglomeration of abstractions about freedom, morality, equality, and the danger of intellectual enslavement by communist ideology. This is accompanied by charitable handouts dressed up in ribbons of moral principle and freedom with the price tag of unqualified political loyalty to us. With the coming of the revolutions in Russia and China, we suddenly underwent a moral conversion and became concerned for the welfare of our brothers all over the world. Revolution by the have nots has a way of inducing a moral revelation among the haves. Revolution by the have nots also induces a paranoid fear. Now, therefore, we find every corrupt and repressive government the world around saying to us, give us money and soldiers, or there will be a revolution and the new leaders will be your enemies. Fearful of revolution and identifying ourselves as the status quo, we have permitted the communists to assume by default the revolutionary halo of justice for the have nots. We then compound this mistake by assuming that the status quo everywhere must be defended and buttressed against revolution. Today, revolution has become synonymous with communism, while capitalism is synonymous with status quo. Occasionally, we will accept a revolution if it is guaranteed to be on our side, and then only when we realize that the revolution is inevitable. We abhor revolutions.
Freeze.
Yes, sir.
So that thing about uh, when we realize the revolution is inevitable made me think of Hillary Clinton and the Arab Spring.
Mm. How so?
It's like, well, the Egyptian government's going to fall. Let's swoop in and say we're on the side of the people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we have and they've utilized this whole I mean, you got to think that the Democrats of today are well versed in Saul Alinsky, right? I mean, if they weren't involved in the protest movement of the 60s and 70s, they definitely observed it and studied it thoroughly. And they read Alinsky a lot. I remember hearing Obama quote Alinsky, and I'm pretty certain I've heard that Hillary Clinton was a big fan of Alinsky. Um, and so they understand this, and this is where the CIA got the idea for color revolutions, you know, which they utilized during the Arab Spring, and they utilized in Maidan, and they tried to utilize in Russia with the Snow Revolution. You know, they utilized it in Ukraine in 2004 with the Orange Revolution. They've been doing this for decades. They've been utilizing this playbook,
Possibly
you
did it in the
know,
United States, Russia Gate.
BLM. One of the first episodes I ever did with Daniel McAdams was us discussing how much the BLM protests look like a color revolution because he was in Ukraine when Maidan was taking place. And so he was like, yeah, it looks just like a
The
color
people of
revolution.
color
Yeah.
revolution.
Yeah. People of color revolution. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, like the ICE protest. also. These NGOs, throwing money and resources to the organizers, and then the organizers organizing protests and utilizing the funds and resources to prop up these protesters in the streets. I mean, we see it all the time. I wouldn't be. I've heard rumors that it's believed that what we saw in Iran in January was propped up by Mossad and the CIA. I wouldn't be surprised at all. You know, so none of that stuff would shock me if it came to find out any of those things there were roots of USAID and NGOs and CIA backing, State Department backing in some way, because this is the playbook that they play out so often. The haves have hijacked the have-nots playbook.
Yeah, because what are we talking about? We're talking about having power and having not power.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
if you have not power, but then you get power, now you're a have. But
Well,
it's
right.
funny. Well, I
Right.
just keep going back. I always go to worst case scenarios. So I go back to the Soviet Union and how, like Stalin, for example, was a professional revolutionary for like 20 years. He definitely was a have not. He's hunted by the secret police. He's internally exiled a few times and he keeps escaping. And then he becomes the supreme leader of this massive, basically, empire. But he still like kind of thinks of himself as like the revolutionary have not. So you
Mm-hmm.
get revolution from above. That's like a funny thing to think about, like Stalin and the boys in the Kremlin being like, man, we still got to overthrow the system. The
Yeah.
the powerful people are out there. It was like, no, man, you're the powerful person now, and like you do kind of know that at some level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and look at Obama as a community organizer, you know, before he went into politics. It's and you think I mean, the haves are going to read a playbook like this and say, okay, so how do we keep the have-nots from wrestling power away from us? Well, we infiltrate their movements, right? So you get what you had with like um, uh, Occupy Wall Street, when they were all going after the top 1%, the millionaires and the billionaires, and they were just hammering away on how they're ripping off this country and they're utilizing their influence to make themselves richer. And the next thing you know, race gets injected and everybody forgets about the money. Now everything's about race and everybody's racist and there's systemic racism everywhere and blah blah blah, and it's all about race now. And it's like, okay, well, like, you just got hijacked, guys. Like, you just got derailed.
Yeah, I used to joke around when BLM first came out, and like my friends would be like complaining about it or freaked out by it. I'd be like, guys, relax. Half the people in BLM are FBI informants, and the other half are undercover FBI agents. It's all good.
Yeah, like the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping attempt.
Yeah,
Like that
11
was,
informants
yeah.
in one
What was it,
mark.
11 out of 15 or something like that? It was
Yeah,
weird.
something like that.
Yeah. Didn't
That's
they all
crazy.
end up getting off?
I think they did.
I think only one of them served any time, and that's because they pled guilty like early on in the process, but I think they eventually all got off. But anyway, yeah, that was a wild one. We have permitted a suicidal situation to unfold wherein revolution and communism have become one. These pages are committed to splitting this political atom, separating this exclusive identification of communism with revolution. If it were possible for the have nots of the world to recognize and accept the idea that revolution did not inevitably mean hate and war, cold or hot, from the United States, that alone would be a great revolution in world politics and the future of man. This is a major reason for my attempt to provide a revolutionary handbook not cast in a communist or capitalist mold, but as a manual for the have nots of the world, regardless of the color of their skins or their politics. My aim here is to suggest how to organize for power, how to get it and to use it. I will argue that the failure to use power for a more equitable distribution of the means of life for all people signals the end of revolution and the start of the counter-revolution. Revolution has always advanced with an ideological spear, just as the status quo has inscribed its ideology upon its shield. All of life is partisan. There is no dispassionate objectivity. The revolutionary ideology is not confined to a specific limited formula. It is a series of general principles rooted in Lincoln's May 19, 1856 statement, "Be not deceived, revolutions do not go backward." So we're going to get into here in a minute the have a little want mores, right? The middle class and how to utilize them. And I would argue that a lot of the reason that you're seeing you saw under the Biden administration the influx of illegal immigration into the United States wasn't necessarily for a voter base, but was for a militarized arm to take to the streets in revolutionary form and protest in case the voter base did vote for another Trump, which inevitably they did. And it was all about getting rid of the immigrants, which is what they were protesting over. And it just strikes me because I think I said it last week when we were reading, it's hard to get working class people out to protest. We have bills to pay. We have children to feed. We have things we have to accomplish. We have to make a certain amount of money. We have very limited, like, we don't have a lot of like cushion, right? And not only that, but we live in America where you can work your way from poverty and become a millionaire. I think it's something like 1 in 10 Americans is a millionaire in one way, shape, or form, whether it's through investments in 401ks or whatever. But it's like 1 in 10 Americans are millionaires. Like Americans have this belief, especially working class Americans, have a belief that I can be better. I can do better. I can make myself better. And just as an example of this, when I was like 17 years ago, when I when my youngest two kids were real small, 2, 3 years old at the time, they were I was bringing home some anywhere between $200 and $300 a week. That was what I was bringing home. Now, like that's a distant memory. I can't even imagine how it is I survived on that. But the understanding that I could do better, I could get to a better place financially and in my life, like gave me that desire and that drive to continue to pound the pavement and work my ass off and build a better life for myself, right? And a lot of other nations don't have as much opportunity as the US. So you have to convince the middle class that the opportunity for them is gone, that the opportunity for their children is gone, that there is no opportunity if you want to get these people out on the streets, the working class, that is, like the lower middle class. Now your upper middle class are your organizers, and they are typically revolutionaries, many of which are socialists, have gone to universities and been taught ideologies. And this is where your movements like Black Lives Matter grow out of.
Keith Knight, managing editor at the Libertarian Institute, had a really great way of kind of framing what you just said, where he's like, there's two ways that people think they can make their lives better. What you just laid out, where you work hard and find ways to voluntarily meet the needs of other people directly as a business owner or working for someone who has a business. And then the second way is going to protests and voting, basically. And so I always think about that now, since he said that to me, when I see all these protests, it's like that's how they're trying to make their lives better. I'm going to go spend my Saturday holding this sign, and that's going to make my life better. That's going to get me money for healthcare. That's going to get me money for food. That's going to get me housing, or that's going to make me feel good because I got those things for these um, these poor toddler like BIPOC that the evil white supremacist patriarchal system is coming down on.
Hmm.
And it's funny because, and you had said this, um, I think you said it on X that like the real battle, it's not racial, it's spiritual.
Hmm.
And you have like these white liberals who will like, if you disagree with them on anything, they'll call you a white supremacist. But then
Yep.
they're like the most crazy racist people you ever met. And they really think that like any person of color who comes here is like basically a child that just needs like socialism to survive. But
Hmm.
then you have people who come here who actually do.
Thrive.
Their eyes are open to, wow, there's so much opportunity. And then
Yep.
uh, they work hard and they start businesses and they make money and they're taking care of their kids and they don't want anything to do with the insane revolutionaries.
Hmm.
And it's like that, and the white liberals can't fathom that. I don't know if you saw this video, but there's a crazy video of um I think he's brown, a brown ICE officer, maybe he's black, but so BIPOC, and he's out there, getting housed by the protesters. And I think he misgenders one of the protesters and they call him the N-word. They're
Hmm.
all white.
Yeah, I saw that.
And they go to that like right away. And it's like, what?
My favorite was the ultra gay ICE officer. That was that was my favorite one. If I would
That's
have
the
known
best
that was
one.
going to come up, I would have pulled it up just to play it. But I would have to go back months to find it.
That's a
But
banger.
that one was hilarious. That dude had me dying laughing. Like, yeah, see, you don't even care. And she's like, no, I don't care. Like, girl, I can't believe you left the house looking like that. That shit had me dying. I was rolling. But all right. So the ideology of change. This raises the question, what, if any, is my ideology? What kind of ideology, if any, can an organizer have who is working in and for a free society? The prerequisite for an ideology is possession of a basic truth. For example, a Marxist begins with his prime truth that all evils are caused by the exploitation of the proletariat by the capitalists. From this, he logically proceeds to the revolution to end capitalism, then into the third stage of reorganization into a new social order or the dictatorship of the proletariat, and finally, the last stage, the political paradise of communism. The Christians also begin with their prime truth, the divinity of Christ and the tripartite nature of God. Out of these prime truths flow a step by step ideology. An organizer working in and for an open society is in an ideological dilemma. To begin with, he does not have a fixed truth. Truth to him is relative and changing. Everything to him is relative and changing. He is a political relativist. He accepts the late Justice Leonard Hand's statement that the mark of a free man is that ever gnawing inner uncertainty as to whether or not he is right. The consequence is that he is ever on the hunt for the causes of man's plight and the general propositions that help to make some sense out of man's irrational world. He must constantly examine life, including his own, to get some idea of what it is all about, and he must challenge and test his own findings. Irreverence, essential to questioning, is a requisite. Curiosity becomes compulsive. His most frequent word is why.
Freeze.
Yep.
So that part where he's like, the free man is like never sure if he's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then that made me just think about how we use these words in politics, left and right. And
Yeah.
my understanding is that comes from like the French, but I was like, wow, what an etymological disaster because we have this idea of right and wrong. And then we have this idea of left and right. So,
Right.
like, embedded into the language is this idea that the left is wrong,
Yeah. Yeah.
which it is.
You're most of the time, yes. Broke clock, but still most of the time. uh, um, you mentioned that, and I that's something I've heard Chris Cuomo say, because every once in a while I'll get up in the morning and I'm just looking to something to like listen to on my way to work. I got an hour and 15 minute, hour and 20-minute drive to work. And his show from like the night before is posted. And I'll be like, oh, let me see what subjects Cuomo's talking about and how stupid he sounds on these topics because he's never correct on anything. And a lot of the times when he's entering a show, he's like, we're here not to talk about right and left, but to talk about right and wrong. And I'm like, yeah, you just repeated yourself. So, does this then mean that the organizer in a free society for a free society is rudderless? No, I believe that he has a far better sense of direction and compass than the closed society organizer with his rigid political ideology. First, the free society organizer is loose, resilient, fluid, and on the move in a society which is itself in a state of constant change. To the extent that he is free from the shackles of dogma, he can respond to the realities of the widely different situations our society presents. In the end, he has one conviction, a belief that if people have the power to act, in the long run, they will, most of the time, reach the right decisions. So, like the wisdom of the crowds type idea. The alternative to this would be rule by the elite, either a dictatorship or some form of a political aristocracy. I am not concerned if this faith in people is regarded as a prime truth and therefore a contradiction of what I have already written, for life is a story of contradictions. Believing in people, the radical has the job of organizing them so that they will have the power and opportunity to best meet each unforeseeable future crisis as they move ahead in their eternal search for those values of equality, justice, freedom, peace, a deep concern for the preciousness of human life, and all those rights and values propounded by Judeo Christianity, which does not exist, and the democratic political tradition. Democracy is not an end, but the best means toward achieving these values. This is my credo for which I live, and if need be, die. So
Priest.
he had mentioned the elites, which I find funny because he never covers the. He's like, I want to give the have-nots power, but he never like accepts the fact that when people get power, they become the elites. That's the way it works. There's always an elite. There's like, so you're just talking about this constant revolving door of revolution. And he even says that later on that there's no end to this. It never ends. You just keep doing it. And so, and the revolutionaries become conservatives as soon as they have power.
The back to the idea you were talking about how the working class, it's difficult to get them to go out and protest and join these mass organizations. But then the people who you do get out there, most of them are just showing up and holding a sign. But it's only a small group of people who are going to actually like be at the top, are going to be the the aristocracy of the movement.
Yeah. The
And
organizers.
yeah, it's like there'll be like 100 people who are just like there, or 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, and then there's a lady that's going like this. Like she's one
Mm-hmm.
of the top people, but most of the people aren't. And it's something that Keith Knight again talks about. He calls it the iron law of oligarchy.
Mm-hmm.
I think is actually a book that
Yeah,
I haven't
I
read
have
yet.
it. I thought I had it. Oh, oh no, I have. I have the psychological study of oligarchy. My bad.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah.
that's two books I need to read now. But yeah, so it's like he hasn't interacted with that at all. Like, and it's like I have no uh like animus toward the people. I'm part of the people. But it's
Mm.
like what the idea that like everyone is going to equally wield political power. It's just no, obviously it's not what's going to happen.
Well, like Lenin called them, useful idiots. Yeah. That's all they are. They're just a tool to be used. And as soon as the protest crosses a line that they're not willing to cross, and they turn their back on the protest movement, then they get called racist right along with everybody else. So it's there's no honor among revolutionaries, I guess. The basic requirement for the understanding of the politics of change is to recognize the world as it is. We must work with it on its terms if we are to change it to the kind of world we would like it to be. We must first see the world as it is and not as we would like it to be. We must see the world as all political realists have, in terms of what men do and not what they ought to do, as Machiavelli and others have put it. It is painful to accept fully the simple fact that one begins from where one is, that one must break free of the web of illusions one spins about life. Most of us view the world not as it is, but as we would like it to be. The preferred world can be seen any evening on television in the succession of programs where the good always wins. That is, until the late evening newscast, when suddenly we are plunged into the world as it is. I found this part interesting because I heard somebody say years ago that people don't vote for what they believe. What is it? They don't vote their current circumstances. They vote their future dreams or their future ambitions, right? So if a person is voting like for, let's say, a Republican that wants to cut taxes and give businesses tax breaks and incentives to start businesses, they vote for that, it's because they see themselves as potentially owning a business one day, not necessarily because they own a business that day. So it doesn't matter what their economic plight is at the moment. It matters what their ambition is. And if the politician successfully speaks to that person's ambition and goals for their future, then that person is likely to go out and vote for that politician.
I like that. And that makes me think of uh, the sociologist. I think what you call him a sociologist, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Righteous Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And he claims in that book that people don't vote for their perceived individual personal interest, they vote for their perceived group interest.
Mm.
So if the person is aspiring to be part of the business owner group,
Yeah.
that would make sense. And I always think of that Jonathan Haidt quote when liberals are like, I don't understand why these stupid poor white people keep voting against their own self-interest, you know? And it's like, well, they're voting for what they perceive as interest, but they see themselves as part of like different groups, maybe like, yeah, future business owner, or, maybe somebody who doesn't want to be uh, ethnically replaced by your NGO funded mass migration or whatever the case may be. But that is awesome. Like the future dreams. That's a really cool way to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember who it was I heard say that, but I thought that it always stuck with me because I always wondered, like, people, I would always ask me, like, why do you look at politics the way you look at politics, given that your status in life and what you do? Why aren't you more on the Democratic side with the unions and, higher wages and stuff like that? And it's because, like, I never viewed myself as poor. I always viewed myself as aspiring to be better and to becoming something better. And so it was the way that I viewed my options in life, you know. And so the if you see more options available to you, then you're more likely to be voting on your ambitions and your aspirations than you are to be voting about like your problems and your, being some sort of victim, even though being a victim is like real popular now.
Back to what you said about the revolutionaries needing to get the middle class or the working class to feel that there's no hope and no opportunity.
Right.
And you'll see that's how liberals talk when they're like, oh, these working class people, they voted against us because they think they're going to be billionaires someday.
Yep.
Well, let me tell you something. You ain't never going to be a billionaire. And it's like, I don't think they're going to be billionaires. I think they think they could, if they work hard, they could do better than
Yeah.
they're doing now.
But what if I retire at 70 years old with $10 million in my bank? Maybe not 10 billion, maybe not 1 billion, but maybe 10 million, right? Maybe I can get there. If I work hard enough and I study and move up in the world, maybe I can, you know, retire with enough money to leave my kids something, you know?
Oh, so you're a white fascist motherfucker.
I sure as fuck am. Say it harder, daddy. All right. Political realists see the world as it is, an arena of power politics moved primarily by perceived immediate self interest, where morality is rhetorical rationale for expedient action and self interest. Two examples would be the priest who wants to be a bishop and bootlicks and politics his way up, justifying it with the rationale after I get to be bishop, I'll use my office for Christian reformation. Or the businessman who reasons, first I'll make my million, and after that I'll go for the real things in life. Unfortunately, one changes in many ways on the road to the bishopric or the first million, and then one says, I'll wait until I'm a cardinal and then I can be more effective, or I can do a lot more after I get 2 million, and so it goes. In this world, laws are written for the lofty aim of the common good and then acted out in life on the basis of the common greed. In this world, irrationality clings to man like his shadows so that the things are done for the wrong reasons. Afterwards, we dredge up the right reasons for justification. It is a world not of angels, but of angles. I'm sorry, not of angels, but of angles, where men speak. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Where men speak of moral principles, but act on power principles. A world where we are always moral and our enemies always immoral. A world where reconciliation means that when one side gets the power and the other side gets reconciled to it, then we have reconciliation. A world of religious institutions that have, in the main, come to support and justify the status quo. So that today, organized religion is materially solvent and spiritually bankrupt. We live with a Judeo Christian ethic that has not only accommodated itself to, but justified slavery, war, and every other ugly human exploitation of whichever status quo happened to prevail.
Freeze.
Yep.
Just he said that word, that phrase, Judeo-Christian again. And the last
Yeah,
time I said it, you were like, which doesn't exist.
it doesn't exist.
And I had this funny idea recently that like, people they blame it's fashionable to blame Christianity for the fall of the Roman Empire.
No, I've
Well,
never heard that.
yeah, we could blame Judeo-Christianity for the fall of the American Empire.
There you go. Yeah, you probably could. But so in the Orthodox tradition, I guess, because people, I guess, are kind of like attuned to or used to hearing Christian, that term comes out of like the 19th century. It never existed in the past. In the Orthodox Christian tradition, Christianity is just a continuation of Judaism. And after the Second Temple, uh, Judaism actually reconstructed itself into a different type of religion than it was originally because they were coming to a point where they couldn't continue along the same trajectory and continue to deny Christ. It was becoming impossible to do. So they completely reformed the religion. And this is why you have like rabbinic Judaism and Talmudic Judaism, which are two different, styles of Judaism. But so it's kind of like a third wave Judaism, if you would. But so the way the Orthodox view it is that Christ is the fulfillment of the Old Testament, so that it is a continuation of the original Jewish traditions. That's how the Orthodox view it. So if you hear me when I say Judeo Christianity doesn't exist, it's because I don't view it the same way as the Protestants view it, and as the as it's been kind of like constructed in modern Christian vernacular.
Yeah, I've always, heard my whole life Judeo-Christianity, Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah.
And but then and I had learned in the past couple of years about how that idea was constructed in the 19th century. And then so I'm like, I will never use that terminology again.
Yeah.
That's the language of the enemy.
It's a dispensationalist view. Yeah.
I will never take that. I will never use the language of that view
Yeah. Yeah. So,
on
and this is
purpose. I might
what,
slip up, but
whether he realizes it or not, this is what Tucker Carlson is ultimately arguing against when he goes and debates Mike Huckabee. And but he hasn't had like Father Josiah Trenum on to talk about this particular subject. I believe he did one podcast with him, but I don't think this subject came up. Um, he hasn't talked to Father Josiah Trenum or Father John Whiteford or any really versed Orthodox priest about this. And the reason I bring up Orthodox versus Catholic, I don't know the how Catholic priests are become like are lifted to the title of priest, but I know that Orthodox go through a lot of education to get to becoming a priest. Like I think Father Stephen DeYoung is working on like his fourth PhD or something like that. Like it's constant education. So so that's why I bring up Orthodox priest. Maybe Catholics do the same thing. I don't know. I'm not familiar with how Catholics work. I guess I could ask my son. He's a Catholic, but I don't know. So
what's what's the take on like the early figures in the Bible who I always think I assumed without even like I implicitly assumed that they were Jewish. But then
most of
I
them
learned.
were. Yeah, like Paul. Paul was Jewish.
But is like Adam and Eve, are they Jewish? Is
No, well, no. Israel, like Jew, the term Jewish comes from Judea, and Judea was one of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? And Israel didn't exist until after the Exodus from Egypt.
so it's like the Bible is like pre-Judaic,
Hmm.
then Jewish, then Christian, all in one line.
Yeah, it's like Jewish oral tradition. Like the Old Testament, like the Torah, the first five books is like Jewish oral tradition handed down from generation to generation. It wasn't, I mean, it probably existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years before it was ever written down. So that's why a lot of the books like get are credited to Moses for writing them, and he even wrote about his death in one of them. You know, so it's like yeah, we know Moses didn't write that. There's actually parts of like I want to say it was Deuteronomy. There's like a distinct line in Deuteronomy where the language changes so much in the ancient text. The language changes so much. You can tell it was actually written like hundreds of years apart from each other, but it's a continuation of the same story. And they accredit one author with the writing of Deuteronomy, but when obviously it was constructed by multiple people.
Let
So
me let me run this idea by you.
yes.
So I got this this idea from Jordan Peterson talking about the Bible, where he
Mm-hmm.
was pointing out that there's this motif of like firstborn sons being usurped by like secondborn or 12th born sons.
Mm-hmm.
And also he had this idea of like the different stories being really connected and there being this like kind of foreshadowing. So like the story of um Abraham and Isaac,
Mm-hmm.
where it's often presented as like, wow, God's a jerk. Like he's telling this guy to sacrifice his son. But he doesn't actually make him do it. But it like puts that idea there, wow, that would be a really horrible thing
Yeah,
to
so
have to do.
it's foreshadowing. Yeah.
Right. And then later he sends his son to sacrifice himself
Mm-hmm.
for humanity.
Right.
So the idea that I had was thinking about how our our pal Saul Alinsky here gives a shout out to Lucifer in the beginning of the book. And since Lucifer is created by God, is like Lucifer in some sense like an archetypal firstborn son, and then Christ is like the secondborn son that usurps his power or is the true heir or something like that.
So this is that question in itself is beyond my pay grade. Like all what I can tell you about Lucifer is I think the name Lucifer is only used once in the Bible, in like Isaiah, I want to say. And it means the shining one, right? Or the illuminated one, something like that. And so we kind of like synonymously use Lucifer with Satan with the devil, right? But like Satan isn't a name, it's a title, right? And so there's this kind of like it's kind of like Yahweh or God, right? It's a lot the name that was utilized for God was Yahweh, and there's the commandment, don't use the Lord's name in vain. So the so traditionally, like the Pharisees stopped saying Yahweh and just started saying God, you know? And so it's like kind of just the traditions have kind of just evolved over the years. I couldn't give you a really good idea of how to view the Lucifer, except to say I would view like Cain as the human Lucifer, like the first human Lucifer, whereas Lucifer, the shining one, was a fallen angel, which was an angel that rebelled against Christ. Like there was a story I was reading. I want to say it was in the prologue on one of the mornings. I do the prologue every morning and put it out on my Substack. And one of the stories, like the this this lady who was like a prostitute, got had found her way to a monastery and became a nun or something like that, and and the devil rebuked God for granting her salvation because the devil can't repent. And he's like, she's been so much worse than I could ever have imagined being in these thousands of years that I've existed. And still, you're offering her salvation and you won't offer it to me. Just let me have her. Give me that one because she belongs with me, kind of deal. And it's kind of like that idea the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And so he's trying to find a way to continue to destroy that woman and to devour her. And so he's trying to convince God that that she's committed sins that can't be repented of. And so and there's a whole tradition. If you really want to get into those types, that real metaphysical tradition of Christianity going back decades and get into the history of like what the Jewish faith was and what they actually believed, I would I would say go listen to Lord of Spirits podcast with Father Stephen DeYoung. It's like he gets deep. And like I said, he has four PhDs, and one of them's in like ancient religions and stuff. So he talks Greek mythology and he talks all that, like Norse, and he knows all those, how those traditions like were handed down, the difference between the gods and how it was viewed back then, and understands the history and as to why certain things in the Bible happened the way they did and why it's lost upon us because certain things were Jewish tradition back then that was taken for granted. So they didn't write it down. And now we don't have the same tradition. So we'll see something and we'll be like, well, that's weird. Why did they do that? And he's able to fill in a lot of those blanks with his knowledge of the ancient history of Judaism.
What was that called?
Lord of Spirits.
Lord of Spirits. Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. And you can go, I mean, their early episodes, the audio quality was terrible, but the content was amazing. So like I would never tell anybody if you can deal with some bad audio quality and some interruptions, you go back and listen to all of it. Like listen to every one of them. I haven't listened to them in a while. I really should pick back up listening to them again. But Father Stephen DeYoung, he's really good on those types of deals, those types of
Nice.
subjects. Yeah. Okay, so now we've changed subjects altogether. We live in a
Revolution.
world, yeah, right, revolution, not evolution. We live in a world where good is a value dependent on whether we want it. In the world as it is, the solution of each problem inevitably creates a new one. In the world as it is, there are no permanent happy or sad endings. Such endings belong to the world of fantasy. The world as we would like it to be, the world of children's fairy tales where they lived happily ever after. In the world as it is, the streams of events surges endlessly onward with death as the only terminus. One never reaches the horizon. It is always just beyond, ever beckoning onward. It is the pursuit of life itself. This is the world as it is. This is where you start. It is not a world of peace and beauty and dispassionate rationality, but as Henry James once wrote, life is in fact a battle. Even evil is insolent and strong, beauty enchanting but rare, goodness very apt to be weak, folly very apt to be defiant, wickedness to carry the day, imbeciles to be in great places, people of sense and small, and mankind generally unhappy. But the world as it stands is no narrow illusion, no phantasm, no evil dream of the night. We wake up to it again forever and ever. Excuse me. And we can neither forget it nor deny it, nor dispense with it. Henry James's statement is an affirmation of that of Job. The life of a man upon earth is a warfare. Disraeli put it succinctly political life must be taken as you find it. Excuse me. Once we have moved into the world as it is, then we begin to shed fallacy after fallacy. The prime illusion we must rid ourselves of is the conventional view in which things are seen separate from their inevitable counterparts. We know intellectually that everything is functionally interrelated, but in our operations, we segment and isolate all values and issues. Everything about us must be seen as the indivisible partner of its converse, light and darkness, good and evil, life and death. From the moment we are born, we begin to die. Happiness and misery are inseparable. So are peace and war. The threat of destruction from nuclear energy conversely carries the opportunity of peace and plenty. And so, with every component of this universe, all is paired in this enormous Noah's Ark of life. Life seems to lack rhyme or reason or even a shadow of order unless we approach it with the key of converses. Seeing everything in its duality, we begin to get some dim clues to direction and what it's all about. It is in these contradictions and their incessant interacting tensions that creativity begins. As we begin to accept the concept of contradictions, we see every problem or issue in its whole, interrelated sense. We then recognize that for every positive there is a negative, and that there is nothing positive without its concomitant negative. Concomitant negative. God, that's a strange word. Nor any political paradise without its negative side. Niels Bohr pointed out that the appearance of contradictions was a signal that the experiment was on the right track. There is not much hope if we have only one difficulty, but when we have two, we can match them off against each other. Bohr called this complementarity, meaning that the interplay of seemingly conflicting forces or opposites is the actual harmony of nature. Whitehead similarly observed In formal logic, a contradiction is the signal of a defeat, but in the evolution of real knowledge, it marks the first step in progress towards a victory. Everywhere you look, all change shows this complementarity. In Chicago, the people of Upton Sinclair's jungle, then the worst slum in America, crushed by starvation wages when they worked, demoralized, diseased, living in rotting shacks, were organized. Their banners proclaimed equality for all races, job security, and a decent life for all. With their power, they fought and won. Today, as part of the middle class, they are also part of our racist, discriminatory culture. There we go. The Tennessee Valley Authority was one of the prized jewels. I wonder when he wrote this if he ever considered the fact that overutilizing the term racist would make it just defunct. Like it means nothing nowadays. It's just like if you call me a racist, I'm just like, all right, like all that means is I disagree with you.
He even says in earlier in the book, like, don't go around just calling people racist. And then the next chapter, these
Yeah.
people are racists.
Yeah, but it's complementarity. It's not contradictory. The Tennessee Valley Authority was one of the prized jewels in the Democratic crown. Visitors came from every part of the world to see, admire, and study this physical and social achievement of a free society. Today, it is the scourge of the Cumberland Mountains, strip mining for coal and wreaking havoc on the countryside. The CIO was the militant champion of America's workers. In its ranks, directly and indirectly, were all of America's radicals. They fought the corporate structure of the nation and won. Today, merged with the AFL, it is an entrenched member of the establishment and its leader supports the war in Vietnam. Another example is today's high rise public housing projects, originally conceived and carried through as major advances in ridding cities of slums. They involved the tearing down of rotting, rat infested tenements and the erection of modern apartment buildings. They were acclaimed as America's refusal to permit its people to live in the dirty shambles of the slums. It is common knowledge that they have turned it into jungles of horror and now confront us with the problem of how we can either convert or get rid of them. They have become compounds of double segregation on the basis of both economy and race, and a danger for anyone compelled to live in these projects. A beautiful, positive dream has grown into a negative nightmare. It is the
He could
universe.
add, he
Huh?
could be like, Al Qaeda was once the vanguard of the revolutionary movement, and now they're just these bourgeois racists that run Syria,
Right. Yeah.
and they're sexist.
And they're sexist. Yeah. Yeah. It is the universal tale of revolution and reaction. It is the constant struggle between the positive and its converse negative, which includes the reversal of roles so that the positive of today is the negative of tomorrow and vice versa. You mentioning Al Qaeda and how that, what's his name? Sharia. What's his name? That's the
I
president?
think it's his new name is Al Shara.
Al Shara.
It used to be
How
Al Jalani.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When he visited the White House, President Trump sprayed him with cologne, and then he bombed Khomeini. Which I'm like, all right, like none of this makes any fucking sense to me. This view of nature recognizes that reality is dual. The principles of quantum mechanics and physics apply even more dramatically to the mechanics of mass movements. This is true not only in complementarity, but in the repudiation of the hitherto universal concept of causality, whereby matter and physics were understood in terms of cause and effect. Wherefore, every effect there had to be a cause, and one always produced the other. In quantum mechanics, causality was largely replaced by probability. An electron or atom did not an electron or atom did not have to do anything specific in response to a particular force. There was just a set of probabilities that it would react in this or that way. This is fundamental in the observations and propositions which follow. At no time in any discussion or analysis of mass movements, tactics, or any other phase of the problem can it be said that if this is done, then that will result. The most we can hope to achieve is an understanding of the probabilities consequent to certain actions. This grasp of the duality of all phenomena is vital in our understanding of politics. It frees one from the myth that one approach is positive and another negative. There is no such thing in life. One man's positive is another man's negative. The description of any procedure as positive or negative is the mark of a political illiterate. Once the nature of revolution is understood from the dualistic outlook, we lose our monoview of a revolution and see it coupled with its inevitable counter revolution. Once we accept and learn to anticipate the inevitable counter revolution, we may then alter the historical pattern of revolution and counter revolution from the traditional slow advance of 2 steps forward and 1 step backward to minimizing the latter. Each element with its positive and converse sides is fused to other related elements in an endless series of everything, so that the converse of revolution on one side is counter revolution, and on the other side, reformation, and so on in an endless chain of connected converses. So this made me think. I was thinking about this the other day when I heard I was on Twitter, I was on or X, and Rachel Wilson just did that episode with Joe Rogan. If y'all haven't watched that, I would strongly suggest go watch Rachel Wilson's appearance on Joe Rogan. She's a friend of the show. She's fucking hilarious, and she's such a sweetheart. And her book is insanely good. So I would definitely go watch her appearance on Joe Rogan. But Destiny retweeted the episode and was like, we have to separate ourselves from these reactionaries. And it got me thinking about something along the lines of what was said there, which was like the Trump election was in and of itself, no matter what you think of Trump from any perspective, it was a right-wing revolution. And it was the first time since Woodrow Wilson that the leftward drift of the United States government was halted and being attempted to be turned around and set against those that had been pushing the government to the left. What the hell is going on out there? Oh, the dogs are fighting. Great. Which means that I'm going to have wounds to heal to clean up later. These two monsters. But so so it was the first time since Woodrow Wilson that the political leftward drift of the United States was stopped, and there was an attempt to turn it around and move it back to the right, which turned the left into reactionaries. And this is why you see these people screeching and screaming. They don't know how to act from the position of not having power. They've always been in power. They controlled the institutions. They were the managerial class, and now they're not anymore. And so no matter what you think about who Trump is and how he acts and what he does, there are some things that I agree with like 100%. And there are some things that I disagree with 100%, like this war in Iran. Completely disagree with that. So no matter what you think about who Trump is and what Trump's done, what he has done, he has flipped the script on for who the reactionaries are and who the actual revolutionaries are.
Yeah, I said this in our first episode, but I'll say it again, that my whole life I've been hearing people talk about the right wing reactionaries. And then at some point, I don't know when, it occurred to me, I was like, wait a minute, like, what are they reacting against? That's never put forth.
Mm.
It's like they're, it's like unprovoked attack. It's like these right wing people with their unprovoked attack. But you're actually saying right in the term reactionary that they're reacting to something. And I started looking at what they're reacting at, and I was like, oh, well, I can empathize with that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Back
Well,
to
and this isn't the first time the left has been the reactionary. Like if you look at like when Gorbachev took over the Soviet Union, the communists were the reactionaries in the Soviet Union at that time because Gorbachev was trying to move the Soviet Union into a more liberal direction. And so that therefore the communists became the reactionaries
I'm
to
gonna start using that. I'm gonna be like, it's another left wing reactionary. Shut up, communist reactionary. Back to the that section that you just read,
Mm,
where he talks about this a decent amount. He brings up physics and quantum physics and the idea of like relativity in physics. And then he seems to be connecting it to this idea of like relativity in uh, knowledge and in values and in morality.
mhm.
And so I'm interested to see how this is going to play out because, he's kind of saying on the one hand, like, obviously there's no like objective good. On the other hand, obviously there's right and wrong. We all know what it is. How he's going to like navigate that complementarity.
Mm.
And then, and I haven't finished the book yet, so I don't know if he's going to mention biology, but so far I haven't seen him mention biology, which I think is interesting because he's talking about physics. And so my like sort of jump the gun critique is, oh, like, yeah, this guy hates the Enlightenment except for its idea of the blank slate. He thinks every human being, all 8 billion of us, are the same, and culture imprints on us. And if it
Mhm.
wasn't for this white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal, transphobic culture imprinting on people, like everyone would succeed and no one would be violent and it'd be a paradise.
Right. Yep.
I see you, Saul Alinsky.
We know your kind. They're everywhere. Class distinctions, the Trinity. The setting for the drama of change has never varied. Mankind has been and is divided into three parts: the haves, the have nots, and the have a little want mores. On top are the haves with power, money, food, security, and luxury. They suffocate in their surpluses while the have nots starve. Numerically, the haves have always been the fewest. The haves want to keep things as they are and are opposed to change. Thermopolitically, they are cold and determined to freeze the status quo. On the bottom are the world's have nots. On the world scene, they are by far the greatest in numbers. They are chained together by the common misery of poverty, rotten housing, disease, ignorance, political impotence, and despair. When they are employed, their jobs pay the least, and they are deprived in all areas basic to human growth. Caged by color, physical or political, they are barred from an opportunity to represent themselves in the politics of life. The haves want to keep, the have nots want to get. Thermopolitically, they are a mass of cold ashes of resignation and fatalism. But inside, there are glowing embers of hope which can be fanned by the building of means of obtaining power. Once the fever begins, the flame will follow. They have nowhere to go but up. They hate the establishment of the haves with its arrogant opulence, its police, its courts, and its churches. Justice, morality, law, and order are mere words when used by the haves, which justify and secure their status quo. The power of the have nots rests only with their numbers. It has been said that the haves, living under the nightmare of possible threats to their possessions, are always faced with the question of when do we sleep, while the perennial question of the have nots is when do we eat. The cry of the have nots has never been, give us your hearts, but always, get off our backs. They ask not for love, but for breathing space. Between the haves and have nots are the have a little want mores, the middle class. Torn between upholding the status quo to protect the little they have, yet wanting change so they can get more, they become split personalities. They could be described as social, economic, and political schizoids. Generally, they seek the safe way, where they can profit by change and yet not risk losing the little they have. They insist on a minimum of three aces before playing a hand in the poker game of revolution. Thermopolitically, they are tepid and rooted in inertia. Today, in Western society, and particularly in the United States, they comprise the majority of our population. Yet in the conflicting interests and contradictions within the have a little want mores is the genesis of creativity. Out of this class have come, with few exceptions, the great world leaders of change of the past centuries: Moses, Paul of Tarsus, Martin Luther, Robespierre, Georges Danton, Samuel Adams, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, Napoleon Bonaparte, Giuseppe, Giuseppe, I don't know how to say that name, Nikolai Lenin, Mahatma Gandhi, Fidel Castro, Mao Zedong, and others. Um, Interesting they put Moses and Paul of Tarsus in there, which before he was a have not, he was Saul of Tarsus and he was a Pharisee and was killing Christians, but okay. Just as the clash of interest within the have a little want mores has bred so many of the great leaders, it has also spawned a particular breed stalemated by cross interest in inaction. These do nothings profess a commitment to social change for ideals of justice, equality, and opportunity, and then abstain from and discourage all effective action for change. They are known by their brand: I agree with your ends, but not your means. They function as blankets whenever possible, smothering sparks of dissension that promise to flare up into the fire of action. These do nothings appear publicly as good men, humanitarian, concerned with justice and dignity. In practice, they are invidious. They are the ones Edmund Burke referred to when he said acidly, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Both the revolutionary leaders, or the doers, and the do nothings will be examined in these pages. The history of prevailing status quo shows decay and decadence infecting the opulent materialism of the haves. The spiritual life of the haves is a ritualistic justification of their possessions. You know, it really pisses me off here. I just got to say this, that he calls the working class, the middle class, do nothings. Like they do more in a day than most of these people. I'm sorry. I just got to stand up for my people, man. More than 100 years ago, Tocqueville commented, as did other students of America at that time, that self indulgence accompanied by concern for nothing except personal materialistic welfare was the major menace to America's future. Whitehead noted in Adventures of Ideas that the enjoyment of power is fatal to the subtleties of life. Ruling classes degenerate by reason of their lazy indulgence in obvious gratifications. In such a state, men may be said to fall asleep, for it is in sleep that we each turn away from the world about us to our private worlds. I must quote one more book pertinent to this subject. In Alice in Wonderland, Tiger Lily explains about the talking flowers to Alice. Tiger Lily points out that the flowers that talk grow out of hard beds of ground, and in most gardens, Tiger Lily says, they make the beds too soft so that the flowers are always asleep. It is as though the great law of change had prepared the anesthetization of the victim prior to the social surgery to come. Change means movement. Movement means friction. Only in the frictionless vacuum of a non existent abstract world can movement or change occur without that abrasive friction of conflict. In these pages, it is our open political purpose to cooperate with the great law of change. To want otherwise would be like King Canute's commanding the tides and waves to cease. A word about my personal philosophy. It is anchored in optimism. It must be, for optimism brings with it hope, a future with a purpose, and therefore a will to fight for a better world. Without this optimism, there is no reason to carry on. If we think of the struggle as a climb up a mountain, then we must visualize a mountain with no top. We see a top, but when we finally reach it, the overcast rises, and we find ourselves merely on a bluff. The mountain continues on up. Now we see the real top ahead of us and strive for it, only to find we've reached another bluff. The top still above us, and so it goes on interminably. Knowing that the mountain has no top, that it is a perpetual quest from plateau to plateau, the question arises: why the struggle, the conflict, the heartbreak, the danger, the sacrifice? Why the constant climb? Our answer is the same as that which a real mountain climber gives when he is asked why he does what he does. Because it's there, because life is there ahead of you, and either one tests oneself, in its challenges or huddles in the valleys in a dreamless day to day existence whose only purpose is the preservation of an illusory security and safety. The latter is what the vast majority of people choose to do, fearing the adventure into the unknown. Paradoxically, they give up the dream of what may lie ahead on the heights of tomorrow for a perpetual nightmare, an endless succession of days fearing the loss of a tenuous security. Or, I would counter, or, kind sir, you do this because it is much more comfortable in your assessment to try to change the world than to change yourself. That's the way I would look at it.
This whole thing about like uh revolution as an experiment and then like climbing up the mountain that has no top made me think about this quote from Anatoly Lunacharsky, former Commissar of Enlightenment for the Soviet Union. He said this in 1933. Imagine that a house is being built, and when it is finished, it will be a magnificent palace, but it is still not finished. And you draw it in this condition and say, there's your socialism, and there's no roof. You will be a realist, of course. You will be telling the truth, but it is immediately apparent that this truth is an actual fact, an untruth. Only the person who understands what kind of house is being built, how it is being built, and who understands that we'll have a roof can utter socialist truth. So I was like, yeah, this is socialist truth. You're going to bring us a disaster. The 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 have-nots that you say are starving are really going to starve. And then you're going to say, well, we got to keep trying.
Well, it's like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, though. It's not about what's true. It's not about what's factually true. It's about what's morally right. So that,
And
I mean,
even and even
that's
Anderson
their whole
Cooper
philosophy.
pushed back against her. He was like, but facts kind of matter, right?
Yeah, yeah, they got to
Like
kind of matter a little bit. Like, we can't. You're not supposed to say that out loud, right? You know this, right? You haven't been briefed.
she did not read her briefing that day.
I'm not sure she's ever read anything. Unlike the chore of the mythic Sisyphus, this challenge is not an endless pushing up of a boulder to the top of a hill, only to have it roll back again. The chore to be repeated eternally. It is pushing the boulder up an endless mountain. But unlike Sisyphus, we are always going farther upward. And also, unlike Sisyphus, each stage of the trail upward is different, newly dramatic, and adventure each time. At times, we do fall back and become discouraged, but it is not that we are making no progress. Simply, this is the very nature of life. That is a climb, and that the resolution of each issue in turn creates other issues, born of plights which are unimaginable today. The pursuit of happiness is never ending. Happiness lies in the pursuit. Confronted with the materialistic decadence of the status quo, one should not be surprised to find that all revolutionary movements are primarily generated from spiritual values and considerations of justice, equality, peace, and brotherhood. History is a relay of revolutions. The torch of idealism is carried by the revolutionary group until this group becomes an establishment. And then quietly, the torch is put down to wait until a new revolutionary group picks it up for the next leg of the run. Thus, the revolutionary cycle goes on. A major revolution to be won in the immediate future is the dissipation of man's illusion that his own welfare can be separate from that of all others. As long as man is shackled to this myth, so long will the human spirit languish. Concern for our private material well being with disregard for the well being of others is immoral according to the precepts of our Judeo Christian civilization. But worse, it is stupidity worthy of the lower animals. It is man's foot still dragging in the primeval slime of his beginnings in ignorance and mere animal cunning. But those who know the interdependence of man to be his major strength in the struggle out of the muck have not been wise in their exhortations and moral pronouncements that man is his brother's keeper. On that score, the record of the past centuries has been a disaster, for it was wrong to assume that man would pursue morality on a level higher than his day to day living demanded. It was a disservice to the future to separate morality from man's daily desires and elevate it to a plane of altruism and self sacrifice. The fact is that it is not man's better nature, but his self interest that demands that he be his brother's keeper. We now live in a world where no man can have a loaf of bread while his neighbor has none. If he does not share his bread, he dare not sleep, for his neighbor will kill him. To eat and sleep in safety, man must do the right thing, if for seemingly the wrong reasons, and be in practice his brother's keeper.
This
I
right here,
believe, yeah.
that section made me think of the first Dirty Harry movie, where the mayor is like, "We don't pay criminals to not commit crimes. We pay a police department."
Mm,
And like I thought about that because I read that as like a threat. Like,
yeah.
you better support our socialist redistribution of the wealth and the bread, or we're gonna kill you. You
Right.
know?
Right.
It's like, okay, maybe we pay taxes to like to put more money into the EBT. Or maybe we cancel EBT and we start paying death squads to drive around at 3 a.m. and kill you.
Well, you've seen all these graphs that are going around about the amount of illegal immigrants or immigrants from each country that utilize like welfare benefits and entitlements and stuff like that, where it's like
I've
something like
seen.
37% from this country and blah blah blah. So one of the things that I found interesting was I was listening to um, Lionel Shriver was on Dad Saves America, I think it was. And I'll check out his podcast every once in a while. He's actually fairly decent at asking questions and getting to the root of things. He kind of flirts with anarcho-capitalism, but he's a pretty decent interviewer. And Lionel Shriver just wrote this novel about an immigrant program that Mayor Adams in New York City had floated out there, where he was saying, "We're going to pay you to house immigrants in your homes." So it'll save us because we're spending $400 a night to keep them in hotels. And there's so many of them, it's costing us billions of dollars a year. So what we're going to do is we're going to pay you like $4,000 a month to keep them in your home. And, and you can help take care of them and help them get on their feet. It never passed. It never went anywhere in New York City, but she took that idea and she wrote a book like out of that concept, to where there's this plan where you house immigrants and you get paid to house immigrants and like sponsor them and shit. So she did a lot of research on immigration, and she said one of the craziest things that she ran into that she didn't even know before researching the book was that in the days of Ellis Island, when people were just coming across all free and doing their own thing, if they weren't able to get in with like let's say a bunch of Irish people came over on a boat and they go through Ellis Island, and they can't get in with an Irish like charity that helps Irish people get on their feet, that it was up to them to figure out their own way. And 50% of the immigrants that immigrated to the United States went back to where they came from because they couldn't make it here on their own. And so that's what created this kind of whole idea of American exceptionalism, because it was like the rarity for a person to be able to thrive and survive in the United States when it was the frontier. And that if you couldn't do it, you went back to where you came from because you were not about to struggle, for the rest of your life or starve to death, lest that be the case.
The those charts that you're referring to about uh like who's using getting the welfare benefits.
Mm, mm,
Like I saw one and it was like all the top countries were countries that the United States has been at war with. So it was like Afghanistan,
yeah,
Somalia,
yeah,
and that there's that saying when people say invade the world, invite the world. And I'm like, well, who made that up? Like they say it like it's a law of nature.
yeah.
Like, look, if you drop bombs on a country, then obviously you have to let people from that country move into your country. We're not monsters, are you? You just drop bombs on them. Don't let them come here. Like, what the fuck? Don't tell me
It's-
that if you invade the world, you have to invite the world. And I'm against invading the world.
yeah,
But
I'm against the invasion of the world, but I don't think Genghis Khan ever felt obligated to house people that he had just slaughtered. So I'm just saying, I don't think that would have flown with Napoleon.
I'm going to use that. Invade the world, invite the world. Genghis Khan. Thanks for that.
Yeah, yeah. Sun Tzu. Oh, yeah. Well, in another thing about this section that we just read here is funny. This is like the most Christian thing he said in this whole thing, right? Because there's a part in the New Testament when Christ is like, you you saw me on the street starving and you did not feed me. You saw me without clothes and you did not clothe me. Right. And then he's like, when did I see you? I never rejected food, giving you food. And he's like, what you do, the least of these, you do unto me. So like, this is like the most Christian section of this chapter right here, where he's just like, yeah, we're supposed to take care of the less fortunate. We're supposed to. And yes, we are supposed to. We're commanded to take care of the less fortunate. We're not commanded to steal from other people in order to take care of the less fortunate. That's where you got it backwards. Like whenever like I was talking earlier, when I was like extremely poor, back when my kids were small, like most of the help that I received was either from my mom or my church that I attended. That's where I got all my help. I did not get welfare benefits. I did not get free health care. I didn't do any of that. My church and my mom were the places that helped me, you know? And that's just the way it was. That's the way I
The
grew
family and
up.
religion, the
Yeah.
two things that you said last week threaten the state.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the biggest threats to the state is a strong family and a strong church.
As as Jesus said, according to Saul Alinsky, like, remember when you saw me hungry in the street and you didn't go and create a totalitarian one world government that would redistribute the resources and feed me, bitch?
I believe that man is about to learn that the most practical life is the moral life, and that the moral life is the only road to survival. He's beginning to learn that he will either share part of his material wealth or lose all of it, that he will respect and learn to live with other political ideologies if he wants civilization to go on. This is the kind of argument that man's actual experience equips him to understand and accept. This is the low road to morality. There is no other. It's funny that he mentions it's the moral life right here, that the most practical life is the moral life, right? Well, and then he keeps like invoking Judeo-Christianity. Well, what is it? What is it that Christianity teaches? Christianity teaches the revolution of yourself, to rebuild yourself in the image of God, right? You were supposed to be pursuing the moral life through the pursuit of sainthood, of theosis, and trying to imitate the life of Christ, not reconstruct and revolutionize, become a revolutionary for the state. This is why Christ was killed. Christ was killed because he was not a political revolutionary. I mean, this is like one of the most blatant points in the text of the New Testament was the reason that Christ was killed because he wasn't a revolutionary. Everybody, this is why Judas like betrayed him, is because Judas was expecting a political revolutionary to be the Messiah, and he wasn't a political revolutionary. Look at every movement that came after, before and after Christ. The people that were claiming to be the Messiah, these people were political revolutionaries. And he was like, my kingdom is not of this world. Like the bread I'm offering you is not the physical loaf of bread sitting at your table. The life I'm offering you is not this physical space.
And poor Judas, the day he realized that, oh my God, this man is a white supremacist motherfucker. I'm gonna
Well,
betray him. They're gonna pay me $7,000 anyway.
well, where Judas like really messed up is he refused to repent and he hung himself. Like you look at like Peter denied Christ 3 times, right? But Peter repented. Judas didn't repent. The whole story points to repentance. And to repent, you have to reflect on yourself. You can't be constantly worried about what the government's doing. And yes, I'm talking to myself because a lot of times I am constantly worried about what the government's doing.
Same.
Yeah. So, do you have any closing statements for this section?
Um, just that so far, it's the book's way different than I thought it would have been because it's getting so much into this like theologically adjacent stuff and this philosophical stuff and a little bit of sociological class analysis. And I thought it was going to be more like, here's what you do, bang, bang, bang. So it's been fascinating. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we will keep rolling through it.
Yes, we will.
Wife is a nut job. She just texted me, I think I caught Parkinson's. All right. You want to plug anything? Where can people find you? Keep up with your stuff?
Well, I write articles at the Libertarian Institute, and I'm on X at Weeks JF.
Weeks JF on X. All
Yeah.
right, man.
So
Well,
follow
yeah,
me because I think I'm being visibility filtered by the man,
the man's out to get him.
or
All
at
right.
least, you know, degrade my reach.
Yeah. Yeah. I know how you feel. Um, I keep getting like spam bots. And I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, how did I manage this? But, all right. Yep. Go follow John on X. I'm gonna stop the recording.
All right.